Good afternoon, friend. Stephen Benoon here with Israeli News Live, and this is something my wife's been wanting me to test out, making sure that we are actually going live. And so I'm going to check that out here real quick just to see if we are live. And as of right now, it doesn't look like I'm live, but you never know. Um, but nonetheless, here's the good news, right? Even if it's not live, I do know if I'm not mistaken here. Yeah, we are recording regardless. So let's get right into this message here. This is alarming. Brittany Page on her page, that's not a pun intended though, has shared ending crime and disorder on America's street. President Trump has signed an executive order, and this is basically rounding up all the homeless. I'd gotten from a friend of mine in Ukraine. And I want to share that with you because it was already terrifying enough watching and seeing his expressions as we talked recently and knowing that I've never seen this good friend of mine so terrified in his entire life that I've known. And I've known him for a number of years. Um, but he said what's happening in Ukraine is beyond anything you could ever imagine. The death toll, he said, is so staggering, you couldn't even imagine. And he lives on the west side of Kiev, and he said 15 bombs went off just the other night. He's clearly fearful for the life of his family, for himself, and um, and very fearful to say very much about anything that's happening there. But he shared a quote with me, and this quote was from inspired by Emil Gustav Frederick Martin Niemöller. And this is what the quote says. And I think of this as I'm fixing to share with you what Trump is up to now. And this is what Bertolt Brockett quoted. He said, "First of all, they came to take the gypsies. And I was happy because they pilfered." Interesting because I've heard things like that about gypsies inside of Europe, mostly with Eastern Europe. Sad to say, but that's the way people talk about them. He said, "Then they came to take the Jews, and I said nothing." Of course, this quote is during the Holocaust time period. "Because they were unpleasant to me. Then they came to take the homosexuals, and I was relieved because they were annoying me. Then they came to take the communists, and I said nothing because I was not a communist. And one day they came to take me, and there was nobody left to protest." I want to read it one more time. This quote here from back during I don't know if it's in the 40s of last century or not, but again, it says, "First of all, they came to take the gypsies, and I was happy because they pilfered. Then they came to take the Jews, and I said nothing because they were unpleasant to me. Then they came to take the homosexuals, and I was relieved because they were annoying me." He's talking about what the Nazis did, by the way. "Then they came to take the communists, and I said nothing because I was not a communist. And one day they came to take me, and there was nobody left to protest." I am watching what's happening in our nation now with all these rules that President Trump is putting out with his ICE military that he has right now in the streets. And they're starting off one group after another. First, it was illegal immigrants they claimed they were coming after. And the people have said nothing. But then they began to take mothers, fathers, people that had children in school, people that were in the process of asylum. One man in the military was married and was getting his wife through the process of her green card. She was taken. It was things like this that continue to happen in this nation. And now they're talking about taking people that are naturalized citizens. Trump's talking about taking them as well. But today, we find out that the homeless, now Donald Trump is rounding up them as well. Eventually, because we say nothing, he will come for you too. Listen into what Brittany Page has to say.
That this administration would do this. Of course, we expect this administration to be callous against evidence-based solutions and eager to criminalize people living in poverty and lock them away. But I continue to be amazed at how far we have fallen and how fast. We're going to go through what you need to know about this, and I'm going to link to all of my sources in the description as always. And I genuinely wish that more people were talking about this, so please share this video with your communities. The executive order, quote, ending crime and disorder on America's streets, builds off of the 2024 SCOTUS decision in Grants Pass v. Johnson that gave the green light to cities eager to punish the homeless for sleeping outside, even when they have nowhere to go. It opened the door for cities to criminalize people living in poverty, to arrest and ticket them for sleeping outside. And according to the ACLU, since that decision, 320 bills have been introduced across the country to criminalize homelessness, and 220 of those bills passed. And a lot of this is built on long-term conservative activism behind the scenes, working to criminalize homelessness, specifically from a conservative group called the Cicero Institute. And through this continued work behind the scenes, we get this executive order where Donald Trump writes in section 1, quote, endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior, sudden confrontations, and violent attacks have made our cities unsafe. The number of individuals living on the streets in the United States on a single night during the last year of the previous administration, 274,224, was the highest ever recorded. And I want to pause here to note that it's interesting that the Trump administration is choosing to focus on the count specifically for individuals who were living unsheltered during the point in time count last year.
I'll put in Miss Page's, Brittany Page's, her YouTube channel there so you can follow the rest of the story. It unfolds this. But you know what's really interesting as I look at this, his immigration policy, now he's going after the homeless. I think of two presidents from the past and what their comments have been and what they actually did. Of course, first one, Jimmy Carter, lived from 1924 to 2024, 100 years old, the longest living president ever in U.S. history. Let's just look at what his legacy was here. Listen in.
It's not just governments that have a responsibility to resolve crises. It's really the conglomerate momentum of dedicated individual citizens. And this is particularly true in a democracy, to demonstrate our faith. Our faith in ourselves, our faith in each other, and our faith in God. That's what Habitat means to me.
That was the late President.
Habitat for Humanity. Jimmy Carter, that spent his lifetime after his presidency building homes, could not afford it. And, no doubt hundreds of homes were built, and he would personally go down and help build some of these homes as well. He did it up until his last part of his life, still was involved all the way to 98 years old. Him and his precious wife both were building these homes for Habitat for Humanity. He cared, actually cared. He also was a president that fought for the Gazans and the Palestinians living both in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. He wrote about that in one of his books there. He was a true humanitarian. but no president ever lived the legacy that this man lived, nor have they ever walked in the footsteps that he did after their presidency, other than maybe George Bush Jr. I hate to call him Jr., but George W. Bush here, who also I saw this interesting, it's 4 years ago, but where he had taken a painting like this, that of Winston Churchill, but he also had his own plan for immigration issues here, and he spoke about that. Now, of course, Trump had not come into office as of yet, his second term, but he had some very interesting policies that he was sharing, and I think they're worth noting now. And I'm hoping that somebody, other than the people that are standing up, you know, I don't say it's the smartest thing to do to go stand up against ICE agents. That's not, they're fully armed and they're just they are truly operating completely out of control, in my opinion. But nonetheless, violence is not the way to deal with the situation. We need to peacefully protest these things because if we don't, they're going to come for you next. As it was said by Bertold Brecht, inspired by Emil Gustav Friedrich Martin Neumoller, and I'll quote it again here in just a few minutes here after we listen to former President George W. Bush.
Thinking about painting, and in essence, I said, if that old boy can paint, I can paint. And so I started.
The paintings themselves are much more than art. They are a timely message to Washington.
Do you want to be involved in the immigration discussion?
Yeah, I do, in a way. I don't want to be prescriptive. I don't want to, tell Congress how to do this or that. I do want to say to Congress, please put aside all the harsh rhetoric about immigration. Please put aside trying to score political points on either side. I hope I can help set a tone that is more respectful about the immigrant, which may lead to reform of the system.
You gave an Oval Office address on immigration.
I did.
These are not contradictory goals. America can be a lawful society and a welcoming society at the same time.
It's been 15 years.
I know.
Still, nothing's been done.
No, a lot of executive orders, but all that means is that Congress isn't doing its job.
Is it one of the biggest disappointments of your presidency?
Yes, it really is. I campaigned on immigration reform. I made it abundantly clear to the voters this is something I intended to do.
Despite bipartisan backing, reform failed during Mr. Bush's tenure. Years later, Donald Trump made anti-immigrant rhetoric a centerpiece of his campaign.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. And some, I assume, are good people.
The problem with the immigration debate is that one can create a lot of fear.
I'll pause it here just for a moment to try to see if we can't get a better signal here, because he does still say some very valuable words even beyond this here. It's very noteworthy, and this is where he'll begin to talk about how he believed a president should react and how he should carry himself. Very obviously, he's talking about Donald Trump, who seems to want to be seen in the limelight and thinking he's always somebody. But he talked about the humbleness of the job. I actually appreciate a lot of what he said. I'm not as crazy about his father for other reasons, but President Bush here has had some very interesting things. And I might add as well, when I watch what's going on with the immigration reform under Donald Trump, he totally forgets he as well as any of our other families, we were immigrants. We are children of immigrants or grandchildren of immigrants. Other than the Native Americans, who are the true Americans in this country here, we are all immigrants. And all we have ever done is push down the natives of this country and done them wrong. Even when we're looking south of the border, those Spanish people that have come across, now I'm not talking about the Afghans or the Arabic peoples that have been brought into the country that came in through illegal, or the Chinese that came in illegally. I realize that. I get that. That was truly a problem. But we forget through wars, we drove out the indigenous people, which was the Mexican people that once owned parts of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and Southern California. We forget about that. We forget about the Navajo, the Cherokee, and the many other tribes in this country, the Seminoles of Florida, even the Creek Indians of Northwest Florida, which my great grandmother was half blood Cherokee, or excuse me, Creek Indian, and my stepdad was full blooded Cherokee. But we forget about these were the true Americans. And then we come in and we act like we can just dictate whatever orders we want to dictate when we've done nothing but put the true Americans into little camps, much like what they did in Israel when Israel became a nation. They put the Palestinians and they've corralled them into little areas, and now they control their borders. Let the Palestinians be free. Let them be their own people. After all, in the state of Israel, they have Palestinians that are part of the Israeli government, part of the Knesset. And Israelis have been able to live peacefully side by side with them. It would be no different in the West Bank if they were given their own autonomy. After all, they were there before the Europeans came, before the Ashkenazis came into that country there. Many people try to say, well, that's Israel's land. Did you forget that Ben Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, actually said that they were the Jewish people from 2,000 years ago still living in the land? They had not assimilated. They had not interbred with other nations like the Khazarians. And by the way, even though I do kind of pick on the Khazarian Knesset, still Khazarians are part Jewish because they did intermarry among them. I don't want to use the word in